How are you doing? It's Allie. Hopefully this connection will stay. Remember the last time I tried this, I tried 3 or 4 takes and I kept losing the connection. As you guys know, July the 10th, 12th, I'll be in Seattle for two educational workshops, or rather conversations that will be dealing with educational racism in our children. And as you guys know, I've been preparing, getting ready, and through that, I've been speaking with people about racism, of course, sharing my story. People are sharing their stories with me. And I will say, yesterday, I was talking to a friend, and she was asking me questions. She's non-melanated, and so she was just asking me questions about, my, school and growing up in West Virginia. Because for some of you all that don't know, I grew up in West Virginia, and it was so crazy because as we are having this conversation, in the midst of the conversation, I had a memory. And just so for full disclosure, I remember having this memory probably earlier this year, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, and then I didn't brush it off, but I brushed it off because also too, when I had this memory, I remember I was waking up for getting ready for work. um, but I remember going, wow, I can't believe I remembered that. And then of course, me being an educator, once you get into the classroom, you forget everything else. All you think of, and their needs. And so as I was talking to my friend yesterday, we started, we were going down my memory lane, and I had the epiphany of this experience. And I remember being in fourth or fifth grade, and I said I'm going to contact some friends of mine, uh, just because I really need to get the story correct. But I remember being in fourth or fifth grade, and I can't remember if we were coming from lunch or if we were coming from off the playground. But I remember in my class, we were just being kids. We really weren't that bad, but kids, you don't get in line. Everybody's talking, the teacher's fussing at you, telling you to get in line. And I remember when we got back into the classroom, the teacher started fussing at us. And actually, as she started fussing at us, it starts turning into somewhat of a yell. And in the midst of her yelling at us, she called our class a bunch of N's. Well, wait, let me take that back. She said, how did she put it? Basically, she was saying that we were acting like a bunch of N's, because I don't say the N word. I just don't say it. Haven't said it for years. It's not said in my household. It's not said in my classroom. It ain't said in my family. And so I don't say it. So, of course, as I'm telling you this story, it's not going to have the same impact as if I did say it. But I remember her saying we were acting like a bunch of N's. And I remember when she said it, I'm going like, at the time, I didn't know what the F was. So that did not come up into my mind. But the version of a kid's of like, what just happened, just happened here. And I remember that one of the individuals who was sitting beside me was a guy. He was actually, we were best friends, all the way up until college. And I remember him sitting beside me, and he kind of did the like, did she just say what I thought she said? Because, when you hear it and you're a child, the way you process is totally different than the way that we process as adults now. And I remember him looking at me and me looking at him. Now, you got to understand, I was a child in West Virginia. And for any of you all who don't know anything about West Virginia is one of the most, and I'm just going to be straight up honest, it's one of the widest states in the Union, in this nation. West Virginia has literally 0.5% of African Americans in the state. You guys, I don't even know if that's an arm. Or we don't even make a 1% of the population. And so we're like 0.5% there. And in our class, even when I try to remember, I don't even know if there were 4 of us in the class. I want to say there were 3 or 4 of us in this whole class, but realistically speaking, that's kind of the actual experience for most African Americans in this nation. Especially if you're not living in the inner cities, we tend to be the minority in our classrooms. But I remember us looking at each other, and he's like, she said the N word. And I said, I know she did. And him and I were going back and forth. And then we became vocal about it. And she told us to shut up. Well, she said, shut your mouth. And I was like, I know. I was like, you're wrong. And he was saying she was wrong too. My voice was louder than his. In the end, he stopped talking. I didn't. And I remember her saying, we're going to the office. And I was like, okay. Of course I'm laughing now, but at the time I was like, I remember saying, you're wrong. You said the N word and you were wrong. You can't say that to us. And I remember her jerking me up from grabbing me up by my arm and pulling me to the office. And I remember me trying to get away from, like jerking away from her. And yeah, and now I'm about to get emotional because now I'm getting mad thinking about it. But I just remember us walking down the steps, and it's still a blur to me because I'm older now. But I just remember going to the office, and they're like, why are you down here? And I'm like, because she called us and she said this. And then from there, it's all a blur. I remember though when we got to the office, there was a place like if you got in trouble or whatever, like I don't know how to explain it, but it was like you were like in this space and they had like something blocking it or whatever. It was like a form of detention. And I remember having to sit there for the rest of the day and do my homework until my grandmother could come and get me. And I remember going home and my grandma like, she's like, what happened? She's like, because, let me say this, full disclosure, I was a talker in school. I got in trouble for talking all the time. I was, quote unquote, the ringleader when it came to talking. But as far as like disciplinary problems and behavior problems, besides me talking a lot, that was usually when I would get, in trouble with my grandma, I'd get phone calls. It was always because she was talking in class. But this time my grandma was like, what happened? And I was like, she said the N word. I was like, Grandma, she called us a bunch of N's. And I told Grandma what happened. And I remember her being so upset, and when my grandma would get upset, she'd be like, then go upstairs. Because that meant she was going to be making some phone calls, da, 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 da. In the end, nothing happened to the teacher. She wasn't disciplined. They tried to convince us that we did not hear what we heard, that she did not say what she said. And the students that were in there did not back us up. And the non-melanated students did not back us up. And it just put me in this place of recognizing how that incident, literally, without me knowing it, has probably been one of those things that has brought me to this place of where I am now, and why I am having the workshop or the conversations that I'm going to be having in Seattle and that I have been having, is because in the end, I know what these students have went through, and I know how it has impacted them and what it does to their self-esteem, what it does to their growth, how they interact with people, and how they carry it with them for the rest of their lives. And some of them will do like me. In order to protect yourself, you will forget about it, or you will absorb it, and you will process it in a way so that you can continue to be a child. Because see, if you don't do that, then you will become bitter and you will become angry, and you will have those kids who do end up becoming behavior problems, and who will rebel and who will resist, and their resistance won't look like my resistance did when I was in school. I was the vocal one. I did stand up. As a child, there was but so much I could do, and realistically speaking, I'm gonna be honest with you, my grandmother being a melanated woman, an older woman, elderly actually, in a white society, there was nothing really she could do in a position to where she did not have the type of community that she needed to be able to support her and to help her fight for something that she was fighting for all her by herself, especially when people in the classrooms, parents wouldn't step up who knew what had happened. And so I recognize that I don't mind being a voice for those individuals who cannot be a voice for themselves, because realistically speaking, it is my responsibility and it is your responsibility and it is all of our responsibilities. But at the same time, we do need to start intentionally putting ourselves in places to where we can learn what's happening in the classroom with our children. We've got to start changing the dialogue in our households with our children and with children in our community. It's not good enough to say, I don't have kids or my kids are out of the house. You still have contact with kids and you still have a responsibility, if nothing but to the people who are in your space, to have these conversations and delve into it. Because see, our nation is in a crisis right now. And when you are in a place to where your children are being attacked in masses, and our children are being attacked in a masses, and it's been the history of this nation. And we've let it go so far that now it's really coming to a head. All you got to look at and see what's happening with these ICE detention centers and with melanated children who are in places where they're being dehumanized. Because see, all that's tied together to what I'm talking about. Because see, I'm trying to explain to you, even though it doesn't appear like it, that this nation has a history of allowing the attack on a personal level and on a structural level to occur against melanated children. And as a society, we sit by, whether it be our peers or our community or our government within our nation. And when it comes to the children, I don't get as passionate and as fiery as I could and I should, but let me tell you why, because I'm a cusser. And when I get mad, I start cussing and I like it. And so I'm a cusser. But jokes aside, we do have to do something. And I am hoping that when you all come to the table, whether you're educators, school counselors, community leaders, activists, organizers, businessmen or women in the community who who care about what's happening in your community, and you come, that you bring also with you an open ear and a willingness, if not to participate verbally and share your story, but to listen to other people so that you can share. So that you can understand what's happening out there. And don't try to justify what happened to these children, why what's happening to them. Don't try and justify what's happening to these children in order for you to be able to process it. Take it for what it is and try to understand it. And if you can't understand it, then take the necessary steps in order for you to be able to understand it, or at least hear their side. Because we're judging children as if they are adults, and they're not. They are the sacred of this earth, and we're not treating them as they are. And I'm going to stop because my story took a little bit longer than what it was intended. But if you're out in Seattle, you're in Washington State, you're in the area, please come out so we can have this conversation. Please, if you have children 17 and under, this is going to be a space that is not being held that is not in this nation. The space that I'm trying to create for us as a society, they're not in this nation in a consistent way. It's not, and I'm still not saying how I want to say it. The space that I'm trying to create is not being created as it should be in this nation in an intentional manner. Actually, these conversations just aren't being held. I know they're not. And I hate to say it that way, but I know they're not, because if they weren't, if they were, then when I would look up stuff on the internet and I would start when I would start looking when I'm looking up stuff on the internet and I'm reaching out to people in order to be able to have conversations, form things, create things, I would be able to find them, and I can't. And everybody's doing the shrug of like, well, who's going to do it? And that lets me know that, hell, if they're not going to do it, I have to do it, because that's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to start creating our own safe spaces and our own just spaces in order to have these conversations, but so we can start developing ways, so we can start developing certain types of strategies and methods to tackle this insidious entity in which we're dealing with, that's been here for the last 400 to 500 years. So I hope to see you in Seattle. Please share this. If you have comments, please comment. Please email me at allieconvosdaughter@gmail.com. If you have questions about about what I'm saying on here, or about the workshop. I keep calling it a workshop. It ain't a workshop, it's a conversation. I said that about the conversation. Please, it's only $35. I intentionally put it at a low rate so that people can't say I can't afford to come, because I want us to have this conversation. I'm making it free for children. If you don't want to bring your children, that's okay. But the teenagers do need to be there, because you need to hear their story and you need to hear their voice, because there are things that they're experiencing and they're not telling us, and they're definitely not telling you. And as a teacher, just so you'll know, you need to understand, I always call it the teenage underground. They literally have their own world. They have their own code. They have their own methods and strategies in which and how they do things, how they connect with one another. And that code that they have is strong. But they also have a code as students and as children of trying to protect their parents too, of the experiences that they experience, because they don't want to see the hurt in their parents' faces. And for some, they know they probably are gonna have parents like me who will go down to a school and try and tear it down brick by brick. And so they don't want their parents' wrath to come in that school either. But that has what's been missing in the school systems for a very long time. Things probably would have changed if parents had only knew what was going on and had heard it from their children. I'm gonna go because this is a little bit longer, and I was told that if you go over like 5-10 minutes, people don't listen to you. They don't listen, and that's all good. It's interesting though, I'm not getting any likes, but I can see everybody who's viewing it. I'm like, on my like Facebook and stuff, I'm like, come on, man, I'm seeing all these views on Facebook. What's going on here on YouTube? But anyway, I will see you guys later. This is Allie. I hope to see you in Seattle on the 10th and 11th at the Centennial Cultural Center and Admiral Byrd in the city. All right, take care.